Hello and welcome to Future Nonprofit, a podcast and YouTube channel where we sit down with nonprofit practitioners and industry experts to talk about what it will take to build and scale the nonprofit of tomorrow. I'm Ted Vaughn, partner at Historic, and today we're sitting down with an incredible leader. Laté Lawson-Lartego is the Chief Innovation Officer at Oxfam, and he has an incredible story with a ton of nuggets to offer you. We'd love for you to check out the Future Nonprofit podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you find your podcasts. Join me as we unpack the stories and lessons of today's most innovative leaders. Let me just begin by saying your glasses are amazing and far better than mine. So
I just changed them actually, so I can give you some tips.
I've been wearing glasses since I was 2 years old, and wow. It's as much a fashion thing for me as it is a utilitarian need.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, try to combine both.
Exactly. Yeah. It keeps life interesting. Well, let's go ahead and dive in just with a couple of get-to-know-you kind of icebreaker questions. What have you read or are you reading that is leaving you encouraged or inspired?
I just got an article today, actually. This one is hard, actually. It's thought-provoking. And the title is Bright, Shiny, Inconsequential. The rise and fall of innovation labs in the aid sectors. So, yeah, a colleague just said it to me today, and he's talking about the fades and fad of innovation lab in our sector. So, for me, as we are standing up this lab, I think it's really a good reading. It's just a wake up call about pitfalls to avoid, as we do this. So it was, eye-opening. And but I've been also reading a lot about a book in the corporate sector, because I think the private sector has been innovating for a long time. And
indeed,
I'm very inspired by The Corporate Explorer, which is a book published on innovation and how people within corporation innovate, and corporation can beat startup in innovation. So it's a good read.
Don't be surprised if I follow up with an email asking for links to both of those, because those both sound like something I should be reading and that I have not heard of, nor am I familiar with. So
happy to share.
Yeah, thank you. Well, let's go ahead and dive in and take me back to your upbringing, to growing up. How did your environment, I believe it was an urban environment, impact you and shape you and in some ways form you for the work that you're doing today?
Yes, I grew up in an urban environment in the city, capital city, Lomé, in Togo. I don't know how much you know West Africa, with working class parents, who never went to universities, but my dad and my mom were quite determined to help me to go to college. So but I was exposed at early age to another type of life out of the city, because I was volunteering every summer as teenager, in my teenagers years, in different rural villages in Togo. So that get me exposed at early age. And in addition, I was also very active, as a college student. I took on a number of leadership roles, including being, my last position was the president of the Student Christian Movement of Togo, which was affiliated with the World Student Christian Fellowship. So it was a global organization. It got me really exposed very quickly. I traveled out of Togo, went to other countries in Africa, in Europe, here in Southern America, and this afforded me the opportunity to witness firsthand the inequality between people living in rural areas and my lifestyle in the city. So also in that role, I led the development of proposals. So I have to write grants to fundraise and execute a number of poverty reduction projects at that time, when I was student in Togo, like working on women's small business scheme, water and sanitation, or going just helping schools to build a classroom, stuff like that. So I was pretty exposed at early age. Maybe another aspect as well was, because of the political unrest in Togo at that time, I had to flee Togo for the neighboring countries, Benin. So I was refugee in my life, and this gave me the experience of living on the edge in a new country without a support network or system. So that's like growing up, and as before I graduate from school, right, from college, and then my very first job with my master degree in my pocket, in Togo, quite a small, poor country in general. My first job was in rural Togo, where I lived there for a couple of years, leading a team of surveyors for a national agriculture census. So that also, living there in rural areas for 2 years also get me a deep understanding of some of those issues, poverty and inequality. Those were some of my upbringing. Yeah. So, through my volunteering work, my summer work, and especially when I was working in the rural areas, that especially brought to light this inequality, especially for farmers. I saw firsthand this inequality about how farmers who produce our food, right? And they work hard off the land, but oftentimes they don't have any land rights. They don't have title, and government or people can come and get the lands easily, or they can just sell it off very cheap. And they don't also have the right infrastructure, such as like a paved road to bring their produce to markets. So oftentimes they are also skewed by middlemen who pay less than their production costs. So those were, few things I was really exposed to early on in my life.
So it sounds like you were this hybrid of entrepreneurial energy, and you were an innovator from an early age, but then also very exposed to inequality and issues of justice and power and the imbalance of those things, and that led you into business school. Did you go to business school specifically to address these issues, or were you chasing another aspiration by the time you went to business school?
Yes, so my first degree was in business, economics and business. So then after graduation, that's where I got my first job in rural areas. And then after that, I worked a bit in development in the business world. But I was like, I need to go back to do something. So I was pretty lucky actually to earn a scholarship, obviously to my church, which I'm grateful for, to go to the UK to study rural social development, agriculture issues. And I did another master degree. So that was like my determination to say I need to use my academic credentials, but also my exposure, my life exposure, my work experience to really see how I can make a contribution. That's after I finished my second master degree, I was like, I need to find an opportunity in this space, right? So I was ready. It was a deep thinking moment, like, what shall I do? Where should I go? I could go back to the business world, make, I'm hoping, a ton of money. But then at that time, it was late 1999, that's when I finished my second master degree. And I saw this, I studied it actually as well. And I had exposure to India. I went to India as part of my master degree. And I was exposed to this microcredit concept. Which is how do you alleviate poverty through economic growth? So it's not really like a charity where it's hand out people, you come and, we will help you. But how do you organize entrepreneur to have access to financial services so they can grow their business, right? So that was very attractive. So I said, yes, I study finance, business, economics, rural social development. I can combine all those things together. So I was really attracted. So my first real job was with an organization in France at that time called Planet Finance. So I was part of a team where we developed a rating tool like the Moody's, right, for microfinance institutions at that time, which was also quite innovative. To do two things basically at that time. So the first one is really to enable microfinance institution to really be transparent. So we look at number of areas, 6 key areas. So to really help them to professionally manage their organization, because it was emerging. It was most of them were coming from the non-profit sector. Mm-hmm. So the rating tool was really compelling to them to really improve their management and professionalization. But the second goal was to also enable them to get access to financial markets, because at that time many of them were giving out loans, but the legal framework did not allow them to mobilize savings, right? Because it's very risky. So they needed to go to the financial markets to get money, hopefully money at low cost, so they can relent. So the rating tool was also helping them to get a ranking and facilitated them to have access to financial market. They can go to investment funds, bank, to get the financing they need to continue their work. So that was quite innovative at that time and helped many microfinance institutions emerging to be more visible and continue their work.
So you've been innovating in these amazing areas from a very young age. It's been a part of your education. It even goes back to your upbringing and this entrepreneurial drive. So as we talk more about innovation and begin to talk a little bit about how you approach innovation, innovation's a big part of your world. It's in your title. I find that to be a blurry word. Depending on the person you're talking to or the book you're reading, innovation, kind of like culture, can go about 85 different directions. Without getting academic or going too deep into the weeds, will you tell me how you understand innovation? And then I want to understand your passion for it and what you want to see innovation do. But let's just start with how you understand it, again, without getting too academic or going too deep into the weeds.
That's a very good question. Yeah, innovation is defined in many ways. But I try to keep it simple, right? Very, very simple is, for me, and what we are setting up here within Oxfam, we use the definition from Andrew Barnett's publication in 2005. Say innovation is the use of new ideas, right? New ideas, technologies, or ways of doing things in a place where people have not used them before. Simple. Again, and I'm looking at this with my colleagues. Something new in the US, something new in, let's say, Togo, completely new for people in Togo, maybe old school for us here in the US, right? But that's their innovation. They can add some tweak to it, tweak and twist. And that's their innovation because it served them. It helped them to solve problem as well. So that's also the problem solving aspect. What are the problems you are facing and how do you innovate to be able to solve that problem? And then when we bring that to the development and in humanitarian space, is also how do we innovate for us to really accelerate how we achieve impact at scale, right? So that's how I see it. And I can go on with some examples. Like when I started, in this microfinance space, 23 years ago, I moved back to West Africa, got my first job with a large humanitarian and development organization, CARE. We were faced with, because the microfinance sector was booming at that time, right? And one problem that the sector was confronted with was a high and very worrisome in-depthness of their customers. So micro and small entrepreneur, would take multiple loans. Sometimes they will use one loan to offset another, right? They will borrow money from a microfinance institution A and they will go off to pay B. And then the cycle continues. They are here in the US. We are seeing the debt level of family is increasing. But we can track it here. At that time, they had no tool to do that. Right, there was no registry or any sort of credit bureau for the microfinance sector in Benin at that time when I started my work with CARE. Even the banking sector, the commercial bank, which was highly regulated in the franc CFA monetary zone in West Africa, only had a paper-based registry for borrowers with a certain amount of load. Yes, there was nothing, no digitalization at that time, nothing. It's all paper.
Like a card catalog in a library.
Exactly. So you just come and then they will look at your name. If you are on the list, then they may decide, depending on what they want to do with you. What we did at that time, and again, is the problem-solving aspect I'm trying to emphasize here, right? Innovation to solve problem. At CARE, I connected back with my previous colleagues at Planet Finance and the sector as a whole to really look at how do we solve these issues, this wicked problem, because it's not good for the sector and it's not good for the people, the entrepreneur themselves, especially in a country where at that time there is no unique identification. As we have here in the US, right? We have our social security number, you are tracked. There was nothing like that. Some people have ID, like driver license, but people have similar names, right? So it was very, very difficult. So we had to come up with a solution and design the first very context-specific credit bureau for microfinance sector in Benin. So we have to really think outside of the box. We have to be creative, and we were very fortunate to receive the World Bank they call it Innovation Marketplace Awards, which I had the honor to receive in person in Washington DC in January 2001. So I had the honor to go to DC to receive that prize, and that helped us to really deepen our solution, and we use it to substantially reduce the over-indebtedness that we were seeing in the sector. And even, commercial banks started to use that credit bureau that we developed. And we found some ways to go around the customer identification issues. Like we use fingerprints of, just photos for people who don't have IDs, because that was very prominent at that time, and still is a big issue. And we use it in rural areas as well, and then it became quite a tool for the microfinance sector, not just in Benin, but in West Africa and other countries as well. So this was, for me, a seminal moment in my early career, right? In terms of how do you solve problem faced by people, and how do you innovate to do that?
And you started your career, it sounds like, in places that were smaller and more nimble than where you are today. So you could do things, take risks, you could innovate in ways that probably had less layers of decision-making or implications. Or talk about innovation in a larger organization that I'm sure has a great legacy and history of innovation, but in today's pace and reality, we have to keep going and pushing harder, right?
Yes.
How do you do that? What does it look like to be innovative in an organization as large as Oxfam? And how do you understand it and get it done today? And what are the barriers that you've experienced?
Yeah, that's a very good question. How do we innovate in such a large organization? Oxfam is quite large, of course, and we are 80-year-old organization as well. So how do we innovate is a good question, actually. But I would say one thing that attracted me to Oxfam is also the innovations culture, to be frank, right? Because CARE was equally big. I mean, when you look at the two organizations, there are a lot of similarity, but this entrepreneurial spirit, right? And I would say I was also fortunate to have bosses, right, who believed in me and what we were doing and gave us the space to go experiment. And sometimes we fail, of course. So I saw similarity within Oxfam, and I can give you some few examples of programs that I saw, and we were partner on some of those as well. One was again in the financial sector was this saving for change, which was also how do you enable women in rural areas to have access to to have financial management culture and have access to finance for their business. And how I saw Oxfam obviously care as pioneer in this space, and many other guys. So we took it to the space. So it was quite good to see these kind of similarities of culture within the two organizations. Another one that struck me when I was in my other organization before I came to Oxfam was also this: how do you help small scale farmers who most of the time confronted with weather, because they don't use as much as technology as we have here in the US in farming, right? We have large farming. They depend on rainfall, right? If you have a good weather, you are lucky, you grow, you can go sell, make money. But sometimes you have bad weather, everything is lost. So Oxfam also innovated in terms of how do you help farmers to manage risk, multiple risk. And they introduced this first weather index-based insurance for small scale farmers in Ethiopia. That's where they started. So I was like, this is interesting, actually. So what I found is it's more like the same culture of people being entrepreneur within, or intrapreneur as you call it, right? Within those organizations, being willing to take risk and being supported by leadership. So I think I saw the same commonality in terms of having this appetite for risk taking, having leadership to provide cover. Sometimes you need that, right? But it's not always rosy. So, as we are standing up this new innovation lab, we found that there is sometimes lack of consistent investment in innovation. And also being more open about failure, right? How do you fail but learn fast and use that learning to continue to improve? So the consistency, the structural culture is not always consistent. So you can see like one department is more innovative, but the other one is more like, old school, right? So those were few things that I've seen so far. And also the lack of consistent investments in innovation. And the third one is also for people in the front line, my colleagues, like in countries, in Africa or Asia, they don't usually have time. They are quite overwhelmed with their job description, right? So although people have good ideas, can come up with thinking outside of the box, most of the time they don't have the luxury to have the time, the resources to go innovate. So that's something we saw here when we did number of interview to really understand how we can solve some of those issues. So those were some of the issues we uncovered in terms of the culture that we need to change here. So consistency, having the leadership, being there, and not just depend on one leader or one department, but having it across the organization, and also investments and consistent investments. And obviously with the current world we live in, right, with multiple and overlapping crises, COVID, we are just coming out of COVID, but conflicts, climate crisis, inequality, growing inequality, I think we really have to innovate to solve those big complex issues.
Let me get even more specific and even personal, as much as you are willing to be.
Sure.
There's always barriers, threats, resistance, headwind to innovation. What is the barrier, the resistance, the threat, the thing that in this season you lose the most sleep over? Or maybe you don't lose any sleep, but it causes the most emotional angst or frustration, or what is it that if you could have a magic wand you would fix, because you're clearly operating from a place of drive, passion, deep conviction. This ties back to your story of origin. You're not doing this to make incredible amounts of money. So what's the emotional side of this? What do you go home and lose sleep over or get frustrated about that you wish you could fix in this season?
Yeah, that's a question that is on my mind. I just got promoted officially to lead innovation, right? I've been in this role for since last summer, so less than a year, right? And we are now in our planning and budgeting season for our next fiscal year, which starts on April 1, right? So as any other non-profit, resources are always constraints. We depend on donation. We depend on the market, the small investment we make. So one of my, what keep me up at night is, I'm hoping I'll put it positively, like for leadership to be consistent and say, look, we are just starting, right? Let's not cut it just at the stage where we are just starting. Because the paper I just mentioned, that exactly what happened. Like in a crisis within non-profits, the first thing they cut is innovation, which is very bad. They will cut innovation, they will cut research, R&D. That's where we should be investing, right? Because we are confronted with complex inequality issues, poverty issues, and we really need to innovate. But that's what leaders most often do, just cut.
Yeah.
That, okay, it's shiny, but so that's, so having a consistent investment and cover from leadership to say, go do it, go figure it out, obviously with accountability, right? With metrics. Just face a financial downturn, and that's the first thing you cut. So that's, but also the culture, right? As I said, some places have been really innovative. I love it. Some places are like, do we really need this? It's extra cost. Maybe can we just use this money to give a grant to this partner?
There's such a gravitational pull towards the familiar, right? The incumbent, the thing we know, is just by nature the thing we believe to be or will be or should be most effective. And it's really hard to embrace the opportunity cost and the mindset needed to see innovation. Let me talk specifically about this. You have innovation in your title. You're the innovative guy for Oxfam, right? Innovation is happening because we have Laté. At the same time, innovation needs to be a lateral idea that cuts across the organization and isn't just a person's job, right? Like innovation's bigger than one human, one leader. How do you wrestle with that tension? You're the innovation guy, but you need everybody to be innovative. How do you use your office, your position, your title to help laterally cut that across the organization?
That's a very good question. That exactly. I see my role as more a catalyst, right, for innovation, not because obviously, although I love innovation, I've done plenty of innovative stuff, and sometimes I fail as well. But yes, it's really how do I create this kind of culture and enabling environment for my colleagues to get whatever they need to go innovate, right? So we have been doing a lot of webinar and meetings to really socialize the concept of innovation, and we call it Agile, a global innovation lab for equality. So we have been socializing this and making offer, like we are here to collaborate with you. If you are facing wicked issues in your programmatic area, we are here to work with you, to brainstorm with you, to bring people in, actually. So we want to foster a collaboration across sector and even with unusual partners, right? So like we have partnership with universities here in the US and globally, think tank, people's movement, indigenous people, feminist movements. So we want to be a broker. We want to bring people together to brainstorm about problem, inequality problem. It can be climate change issues. It can be gender equality issues. It can be economic justice issues, right? It can be, so colleagues who come say, we are developing this tool. So it can be a tool, innovative tool that we can really fine tune. And so that's our offer to our colleagues. So we really want to work with them, catalyze this new mindset. So don't be afraid. Also give colleagues cover that they need as well, right? Because sometimes it's just in the space. Maybe 80% on your day-to-day job, but spend 20% on innovative things, right? And also provided the resources. So we have unrestricted, flexible resources that we can provide to colleagues, up to $100,000 for pay, depending on the stage. And also we also looking at how do we scale up existing innovation. So right now we are developing a partnership. I won't name them now because it's not official, but there is innovation I was not even involved. but it was developed by my colleagues in Oxfam, Philippines, right, in the Philippines. And in terms of how do you anticipate humanitarian issues? How do you, they call it anticipatory action, but how do you use data, big data, to really predict and enable government to be able to push resources to impoverished communities very quickly, right, before they have a typhoon, right? And they tested that in 3 different provinces. It worked. So now we are working with them to how do we take it nationally in the Philippines? And then how do we take it to scale in other countries in Asia or in Africa, etc.? So that's our role. So yeah, we are here to facilitate, to catalyze, to broker, to help colleagues to learn more about methodologies to innovate and support them. So it's not me, it's them actually. We work for them. They are our bosses.
I love it. So your metric for success is not your ability to single-handedly lead innovation, but your ability to foment a movement of innovation within the minds and hearts of the leaders of Oxfam.
You said it very well. Yes, totally.
I love it. Okay, so we've both seen a lot of organizations. You've been in and out of small and large. You've been doing this for a while. You know, we're passionate about culture as an agency. We specialize in organizational culture and its intersection with brand strategy. Talk to me about what you see as common barriers to innovation. When you think about your own organization or those that you work with, or perhaps those that you serve, what are the cultural barriers, the leadership barriers, the organizational barriers that mitigate or restrict innovation?
So there's a lot of challenges and barriers to innovation, and one that I believe in first and foremost, leadership. Right, you really have to show leadership, and if you don't have buy-in from leadership, it's extremely difficult to have a culture of innovation. Right, if leadership is always interested on transactional, how much have we raised, but not really how we do things, and are we doing it differently? Are we thinking outside of the box? Are we positioning ourselves to be relevant, to add value, right? So I think the leadership piece is really key. And in some of my previous leadership role, I had to give cover to my team, say, look, go figure it out, go innovate, right? I'll protect you. I can get fired. That's okay, but I'll protect you. So leadership to really demonstrate this kind of culture of innovation, being willing to really take the risk, take a bet, and provide support and cover. For me, that's extremely important. That's an ingredient for success. And you also want to avoid this culture of innovation is this shiny magic bullet. No, that's also a culture that we want to demystify, right? Is innovation is ways of thinking, ways of doing, and of course ways of achieving concrete, tangible result, outcomes, impact at scale. Because again, we live in a world full of opportunities, of course, but a lot of challenges as well, right? So how do we bring different culture people together to work? So breaking down silos, so it's not just Oxfam or in our vertical, but really be horizontal and bringing keep people in. So I think this culture is really key. The other culture that we see is again this lack of appetite to talk about even failure, right? We always talk about success. Okay, how much success have we received? How much success? So in my previous role, again, I was quite bold to talk to my CEO and say, look, can we start some failure talk, right? From the top. So my CEO at that time was receptive, lucky, and with colleagues, we set up like the failure talk within the organization. So that was really, can we talk about that here?
That's really good.
Yes, you can. Yes, bring it forward. So that's something we started, and it just opened up. People are like, we tried this. So for me, it's like failure is helping other organizations to avoid the same mistake, right? And wasting donor resources. Right? If we can talk about failure, we can codify failure, we can share it across the sector so people know that, we already tried this. It doesn't work. This is the evidence. Please do something else. So like it takes less time to figure things out and move faster actually. So that's kind of culture that we try to instill and make sure that organizations can continue to innovate.
And senior leaders are so important because how they show up and how they operate and how they make decisions is more important, frankly, than the content of their decisions. Rarely will a senior leader make a decision that sinks the company, but how they make decisions over a period of time often does more damage or good than the decision itself, right? Totally. So I love that you're starting with senior. And it's easy to, I think at times, pick on senior leadership, right, of which we're often a part of. So let's turn the lens on us, on you. What's a mistake? What's a failure, a point of failure in your past that you learned the most from?
I was working in Bangladesh, actually. We had a big project funded by the Gates Foundation and other. It was one of the flagship initiative. Most of the time, you see the money, you don't really step back to say, let's really have an evidence-based design, right? So you make assumptions and you make promises because the money is attractive, right? Who wants to say, Gates Foundation comes and say, look, I'm interested in like dairy value chain in Bangladesh. We give you $15 million over 5 years. Go figure it out, right? So so it's really taking the time to deep dive as needed, right? Obviously, but you have sprints, you move fast, but also deep dive, check your assumption. So we were trying to really figure out how we make good on our commitments. How do you provide access to affordable and quality agriculture input for small scale dairy farmers in Bangladesh? And man, we had to fail many times before we figured it out. So we had to do a lot of trials and errors because we didn't really have time to do the proper data gathering and talk to the customer, being customer centric, right? And gather data from them and use it. So I learned from that experience a lot. But in the end, we figure it out. We figure out a model that is like we use a franchise approach, micro franchise approach to help the entrepreneur in that country to really be able to come together as part of a network, of branded network to offer. So in the end, it was good. It was quite successful. But before we get there, it took a lot of learning. But also the quick jump to say, oh, this work, let's take it to India, let's take it to Ethiopia, let's take it to Malawi, right? And I was like, let's take it quickly. No, it doesn't work that way. So I've learned a lot. Let's step back. Context is king. A model that works in one country, you may adapt it in another context, but so it's really the push of, as a leader, you always want to dream big, have impact at scale, without really, taking a step back to understand the context. And even sometimes start small is better than, dream big. So start small. And so we were not, I had to leave at some point. I left the organization at some point, but we were trying to really push this model that we developed in Bangladesh into other countries, and it didn't work. We have some few other adaptation of that, but not the same model. So I think trying to be adaptive, context specific, and evidence based, to me, that's something that I've learned as well. You need the data, you need to look at the analytics and make sure that what you are doing is really set up for success as well. Yeah.
That's really good. We're nearing the close of our time, and I'm thinking specifically about two groups of leaders listening to this podcast, and I want to ask you a question for each of those groups. Okay. The first group are leaders who are passionate about innovation, who have probably been fighting against headwind or cultures that don't know what to do with innovation, and they might be overly bullish or overly aggressive or overly assertive. Talk to that group. How have you maintained balance between being a prophetic voice, pushing, challenging, innovating, being the tip of the spear, but not getting yourself fired, not shooting your influence in the ass, not right? Because those things can all happen. We live in this constant tension, right? Especially when we're in charge of something as hard, abstract, and new as innovation. How do you live in the tension of pushing and challenging, but at the same time adding value and maintaining influence?
Yes, that's exactly where I am right now in my work within Oxfam. Part is, let's just go everywhere. We work in more than 60 countries, right? So there are some part of me, but also the leadership want to really go fast. But then just based, I've been in this space for, a couple of decades, and just based on experience, let's start small. Let not even do huge publicity. So because we know one failure can just kill the whole thing. So although we are not afraid to fail, but we want to be thoughtful and also test, even because the Agile Lab is new. As I said, we started last June. So we took the time to do survey, to gather learning from the sector, from even within Oxfam. So we are, 8 months into it. I was not even full-time. So we say we wanted to start with few countries to really hone in on what we want to do, the methodology, the approach. And also we were committed to this principle of being feminists and decoloniality, right? This in our space now, there is a push for decolonizing aids and partnerships. So yeah, we focus on just few countries. Say, let go test the water with them, get the leadership, get the buy-in before we go big. So that's where we are. So I would say don't blow it out at the beginning. Be balanced. And also some early wins can help. So we have some good opportunity we are working on top. So just try, because my team is very small, is me. I just hire someone who is starting in the next couple of weeks, has been working with me as a consultant, but now coming full time. So it's very small team. We are hiring someone new. So starting small with some tangible opportunities, and then use that as springboard to really learn, but continue to improve. So we set up like sprint where we can go every 90 days to really review our strategic manifesto and update that, right? So yeah, be ambitious, but also be realistic as much as possible so that you don't lose momentum. You don't shoot yourself.
That's really good.
That's what we are trying to do. Yeah.
That's so good. I just was typing notes as you were talking about. You've said start small multiple times in this conversation, and I think there's a real theme there around measure, pace, think big picture, right? Innovation's a marathon. It's not a sprint to the best idea in your head at the moment, right? Which is such a challenge, I think, for young innovative leaders especially, right? Yeah. Okay, the last question, the last group of people that I want you to speak to, they're the senior leaders who have the power and authority, no matter how small or large the organization, to encourage and celebrate and build momentum towards innovation or mitigate and restrict it. What's a piece of advice you would give those senior leaders, especially those who really don't know what to do with innovation? It's this big idea, a lot of books, a lot of people like you and us talking about it. It's sexy, but where do they begin? They have the power. What would you advise them? Where do I even start? Especially a nonprofit, so restricted, so tyranny of the urgent.
The world is changing very fast. So is our sector as well. And again, as I said earlier, our raison d'être is being questioned, right? In terms of what value do we add in this world as non-profits? Are we achieving impact at scale? So I would say innovation is definitely part of the solution. But the way to do it is extremely important, right? So how do you do this with all the power that we have to do it right, and also do it sharing power, right, with our partners, allies. So how we do this is really important. And how you make decision as also, that's something we are looking into. So how do we make decision? How do we share resources in a way that really speak to our values and our principles as Oxfam is key. But also be clear, innovation is not a magic bullet, right? It's not a new fashionable thing to do, right? So for those leaders, they really have to understand and be patient, and be consistent as well. right?
So good.
And for them to also learn to read and understand that innovation is a big, powerful tool, but it has, its weak side as well. So it's not the magic bullet. And they have to support me to support innovator within, give them room, be patient with them, and be consistent with investments to make it happen. But it has proven, I live it through myself, and this is the way to go if we really want to add value and achieve impact at scale in this area of work we do.
Well, you've provided a ton of impact and value to the show. Unbelievable stuff, tons of notes, lots of nuggets are going to flow out of this. Thank you so much. For more stories from experts in the industry and to learn how to take your nonprofit into the future, like this video, subscribe to our channel and podcast, and visit makehistoric.com/insights. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Ted Vaughn, and this is Future Nonprofit.